All right, AP World History. We are going to get focused here on more direct approach to the causes of World War II and get into the rise of the Nazi Party, Adolf Hitler, and all that business in Germany, which we have pretty much kind of danced around so far. And so that's where we'll start with is the rise of Nazism. And so a little bit of background to go along with that. Coming right out of World War One, Germany is led by a more democratic type government. So when I mean democratic, um, I'm talking like small d here in terms of a form of government that allows for free elections, representative government, that kind of a thing. So you know, um, I'm not going to say exactly like what we have here in the United States, but reminiscent of that form of government, a rejection of the autocracy that they had during World War One under Kaiser Wilhelm, and pretty much kind of the autocratic rulers they had going all the way back to unification and Bismarck. This is Germany experimenting with a much more modern form of government. All right, it gets its name from the city where it gets its beginnings here, and that is pronounced Weimar. Okay, Weimar, not Weimer. I know that's what it looks like, but you see the W's in German. It's always with a V. Right, Weimar. So the Weimar Republic is what is going to be leading Germany. It's going to be a government that is going to have a lot of struggles. First of all, they're the ones who have to deal with all of the punishments dealt out by the Treaty of Versailles, which causes a lot of anger and frustration amongst the German population. Over time, some of them are going to kind of lay some of the blame for all of that on the Weimar Republic. And then shortly after the end of the war, faced with the economic problems of having to pay reparations and all this other business, the Weimar Republic is going to make a poor decision, and that is they're going to start printing more German Deutschmarks to basically to try to deal with their economic problems. They have no gold to back it up. They're just printing currency. What it creates is a situation of what comes to be known as hyperinflation, where the value of money decreases rapidly. And at its height, the German currency is so devalued that it takes literally almost like millions of Deutschmarks to equal the value of just one U.S. dollar. It's just crazy, out of control, and that just triggers other economic problems in post-war Germany, high unemployment, things like that. And so while the Weimar Republic holds some responsibility with that, they're also going to, they're also going to make some mistakes that are going to make their situation a little bit worse, and that is going to result in a lot of Germans beginning to question whether a democratic type government is really what is going to best work for Germany. And you have to balance that out. Their tradition has been to be led by these all powerful, I won't necessarily say full on dictators, but autocratic rulers. Rulers where pretty much they most of the final word in governing rests with them. And so some Germans do. They did begin to lose faith in whether the Weimar Republic is the best approach for Germany going forward into the future. All right, which coincides with the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. A little bit about him. Hitler, a World War One vet himself, and one who definitely does not support the Weimar Republic, believes that democratic governments in and of themselves are weak, and that to have a strong country, you need a strong leader, not a strong political party or organization like that. He ends up joining. He doesn't create. Joining a relatively new political party, a lot of new little political parties forming up after the end of World War One in Germany. And this one that you have there, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, long name. You switch that into German and then kind of abbreviate it, and that's where you get Nazis. Okay, just that's the way you can kind of equate those two. And Hitler very quickly rises to become the leader of this party. When he first joins, he actually joins acting more as a spy. He's kind of keeping tabs on the party to see if they're plotting revolution or anything dangerous against the Weimar Republic. But he loves the message of them of trying to rebuild a powerful Germany and to basically to get even for what they see as the injustices of the Treaty of Versailles. And he joins and finds that he has the gift of public speaking at this point in his life, and very quickly zooms up, and before you know it, is the leader of the Nazi Party. Okay, still early on here, sorry, in the 1920s, he and the Nazis make an attempt down in the southern German city of Munich, where the Nazis get their beginnings, to launch a revolution. What they believe is going to be a revolution that's going to overthrow the Weimar Republic and establish the Nazis in control in Germany. They're getting way ahead of themselves. In 1923, the party is still very, very small. They don't have a lot of influence. Many people in other parts of Germany have never even heard of the Nazis or Adolf Hitler. Anyhow, they try to pull off this little revolt, this little revolution down in Munich. They organized themselves in a beer hall in Munich to start this revolt. And that's where we get the beer hall putsch. Okay, putsch, a German word that pretty much just means like coup or revolt. All right, it's a disaster. The police get word that this is going down, and as Hitler and this small group of Nazis start marching out into the street, they are met by police who open fire on them. Hitler narrowly escapes being shot and killed himself, but instead is arrested, put on trial for treason against Germany, and found guilty and thrown in prison. Probably a prison sentence that should have been a long, long time, but he had a very, very sympathetic judge and members of the justice system who, even though they represent the Weimar Republic, also have some of those doubts. And so Hitler kind of gets the slap on the hand sentence. And while he's in prison, he writes a book called Mein Kampf, which means my struggle. And in this book, Hitler pretty much is going to lay out his blueprint, his plan for a rebuilt Germany that will demand respect, will undo the wrongs of the Treaty of Versailles. In Mein Kampf, he writes about what he refers to as the stab in the back, and he pretty much says that Germany did not lose World War I because they lost the war militarily, that they were just outdone on the battlefield. He says instead why Germany lost World War I was a combination of weak politicians who, in effect, stabbed the soldiers in the back while they were facing the enemy by not supporting the war. But he also goes on to add that Jews played a role in this, okay? And, there was an active Communist Party that was kind of creating problems in Germany toward the end of World War I, and also was active in those years right after World War I. Some of the members of the Communist Party were Jewish, but a lot of this goes back to Hitler's own anti-Semitism. This is something that he had been kind of enlightened on when he was kind of a basically aimless, homeless kind of a person before the war, and fell in with a group of a lot of other young men who, whose lives basically were not happening the way they'd planned. It's kind of like that whole failure to launch kind of a thing. And they tapped into, old existing anti-Semitism that had been around for centuries, to in effect, I mean, I'm simplifying here a bit, but to say that, our problems are because of the Jews. And if the Jews were gone, our problems are gone. And this is going to be a very relatively kind of simplistic message that Hitler is really going to center a lot of his, support from other Germans who will join this Nazi party and will help propel him into power. It's going to take some other factors as well. But this anti-Semitism is a huge part. When we talked about the rise of these fascists, that they pick out one group to say, this is the group, all of our problems are because of them. And this is where that anti-Semitism comes in, okay? The other part of that I have tied in there with D is this idea that Hitler has about what he calls Aryan racial superiority. he pretty much is going, even though he is born and raised in Austria, he actually makes a deliberate choice to join the German army during World War One because he believes that Austro-Hungarian Empire is too multi-ethnic, and he sees the Germans as being much more homogenous in terms of race and culture and ethnicity, that kind of thing. And so he is going to, I mean, by the time he comes to the rise of the Nazi Party, he now views himself as a German. And he is going to be a proponent of this idea that Germans represent this, what eventually will be referred to as a master race. And that he sees this Aryan ideal, which is really odd considering the way he looks, of this perfect kind of blonde-haired, blue-eyed, Nordic Aryan, man and woman that is going to be this master race that eventually is going to, in his vision, will take over the world, and the people who are less than them will serve them. Those kinds of concepts. Again, you look at Hitler himself, he's kind of a little bit more on the short side, dark hair, dark eyes. It's odd because he doesn't meet any of the standards that he himself values. But that would just be one of many, many inconsistencies that will kind of tie in with the rise of Nazism and Hitler. Also writes about in Mein Kampf about his plans for this rebuilt Germany, and his belief that Germans, because they are a master race, are deserving of what he refers to as Lebensraum, which is translated into living space. And what he, in effect, is arguing is that the Germans are deserving of more land than just Germany itself. Because they're a master race, this is something that is just should by nature should be theirs, and that he sees this return to almost kind of like this kind of going back to an agricultural based society where you're going to have these German farmers and then you're going to have people who aren't Germans who are pretty much going to be relegated to like serfs and peasants working for the Germans. You can kind of tell by looking at that map that one of the areas he's really looking towards for that Lebensraum is east of Germany, Eastern Europe, and then on into the Soviet Union. Hitler hates communism. And he also hates the Soviet Union because it also happens to be, besides the home base of communism, also home to a large Jewish population. He sees large Jewish populations in Eastern Europe, large Jewish populations in the Soviet Union. And so this all just, it's like this bad stew of communism and his anti-Semitism all coming together. And so very early on, he'll be plotting as to how Germany is going to conquer the Soviet Union, destroy communism, and turn it into basically a gigantic colony, an agricultural colony that will be these, large plantations, farming plantations run by, the master race and the Russian people relegated to slaves, basically working for them. All right, those are the kinds of things he's writing about in Mein Kampf, and anyone who had taken the time to read it in the 1920s, 1930s, before he comes to power. No surprises when this guy does come to power, because once he's in power, he pretty much just kind of, all right, I've got the plan right here. I wrote it, 10 years ago, and now I just start implementing it. No one can act too shocked and surprised. All they had to do was read Mein Kampf, which does end up being translated in many other different languages, and they would have known exactly what Hitler was on to. All right. Through the rest of the 1920s, the Nazis actually don't gain a lot of popularity in Germany. Once Hitler gets out of prison, he's back to, trying to build up more support. But actually, by the end of the 1920s, things are starting to go economically a little better for Germany. The Weimar Republic kind of goes through a little period, a little rosy, happy little period there where unemployment begins to decrease. More Germans are finding work. And it's looking like maybe it's going to be a happily ever after kind of a story as you get towards the end of the 1920s. But then we get to the end of 1929, October 1929, the crash of the stock market, the beginning of the Great Depression here in the United States. And that Great Depression, as I talked about back when we were covering that, does go completely global. and it hits Germany hard. They are looking at I think their unemployment rate reaches almost about 30%. I mean, just massive, massive unemployment. And all of a sudden, their society is back on the ropes again. This is going to be Hitler's golden opportunity because it's going to create desperation. It's going to create Germans looking for anyone who seems to be pointing in a way that says, I can get you out of this mess. The Germans are looking at other countries. They're looking at the Great Depression. It's impacting France, Great Britain. They're reading about the impact it's having in the United States. I mean, this is a scary, scary thing. And people, some people wondering, World War I didn't take us out, but, is this global financial meltdown going to be the beginning of end times, for all of us? Hold on here. I got a dog uprising. Crazy dogs. Anyhow, this is going to be the door that opens for Hitler. Almost immediately after the Great Depression, as the Germans hold their elections, more and more Nazis are elected to their representative government, the Reichstag. And by let me get this moved on here. There we go. By 1933, there are enough Nazis who would have been elected into the Reichstag for Hitler to pretty much be expected to be given a position within the German government. All right. He is given the position of chancellor, which is hard to try to equate that. It's almost like vice president, I guess, but not quite as powerful. Germany does have a president. He's an old guy that had been a general back during World War I, Paul von Hindenburg. He gives Hitler this position, which, I mean, actually it's a platform for a lot of power. And he does it thinking that by keeping Hitler close, he's going to be able to control him. All right. Bad mistake. Hitler is very much an aggressive and cunning kind of a guy. I mean, he's one of those people that can kind of read people and figure out where their weaknesses are and go to work on them. And he's got a plan. And the minute that he becomes chancellor, he is just biding his time, knowing he's just waiting for the right opportunity to strike and to take full power. That happens the very next year when Paul von Hindenburg dies. All right, he passes away, and from that point, Hitler basically seizes power. There is no one to stop and say, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," because again, the Great Depression is having its impact. Even though Hitler is, the Nazis are in the Reichstag, and Hitler is now in there within the government, they're still not seeing any improvement in the Great Depression. And so when Hitler steps up to seize power and to pretty much say, "I'm now going to become the leader, the Führer," okay, der Führer, the leader. Out of and call it fear of the depression and the future, no one steps in to say, wait a minute, we've got a constitution, we've got rules, and what you're talking about here is a violation of those. Instead, they just let it happen, and Hitler takes control. One of the first things that happens after he takes control is the Reichstag, which would be like our U.S. Capitol building back in Washington, D.C., where where Germany's government meets, its representatives, is burned down. The Nazis claim that it is communists who are responsible for this. Hitler declares a national emergency. Okay, and by declaring that national emergency, he basically suspends the civil rights of German people. Your right to go out and protest against your government, things like that. The Weimar Republic allowed, and Hitler is going to use it as a way to basically shut down all political opposition in Germany. Okay, after this clampdown takes place, it will not take too long before he starts outlawing other political parties, so that the only party that exists is going to be the Nazi Party. This is how he gains his control. This is how he gets basically Germany into a position where it becomes his. Okay, and so he does. With that, he consolidates his power. Like I said, he eliminates opposition. He restricts the rights of Germans of what they can and cannot do. All right, and then with that, I mean, he's really applying those principles of fascism, is really what you're looking at. The Third Reich is what Hitler calls Germany under his control. They look at history of Germany as kind of like the early history before their Germany is the First Reich. The Second Reich is after Bismarck, the unification, and modern Germany is created. And now the Third Reich, which Hitler claims is going to last for 1,000 years. And I just mentioned notice there's no quotation marks on the other side there. Oh well, you know what I mean by it. Okay. Anyhow, that's where that term comes from. It's just his reference. Kind of like how the British call their rule in India the Raj. Well, Third Reich, that kind of a thing. All right. Hitler also, now that he has this fascistic control over Germany, also starts his war against Jews in Germany. Germany does not have a massive Jewish population, but they do have some. And the Germans first pass laws by about 1935 called the Nuremberg Laws. These laws restrict Jews from being able to work in certain kind of fields. Jews that are teachers and professors are fired from their jobs, told they can only work in schools that are Jewish only. So they segregate the Jews away from the rest of the Germans. They pass laws saying that German people can't be married to Jews. I mean, just all these laws that are trying to basically, pretty much make the Jewish presence in Germany kind of like disappear without actually making people disappear. Just minimizing the role that they have and the influence they have. They step it up another notch in November of 1938, what comes to be known as the Night of Broken Glass, which in German is Kristallnacht. And on that night, this comes shortly after the assassination of a German diplomat. The Nazi, I think this happens the assassination takes place in Paris. And the young man who carries it out is Jewish. And he does it out of anger over how Jews are being treated in Germany. All right. The Nazis respond to this by basically, I don't know if you've ever seen any of those Purge movies. It's almost like they do a version of that. In effect, what they pretty much tell the German people is, look what Jews have done. They've killed one of our government officials. The nerve of these people, and we need to show them our anger. We need to show them our rage. And it is in effect like the German government saying, tonight, you can do whatever you want to Jews, and no one's going to try to stop you. You will not be arrested. You will not be, anything you want to show your anger and rage. And German people come out. A lot of them are basically like the stormtroopers of the Nazi party, so they're uniformed men. But there's even some German civilians that participate in this. They burn synagogues. You end up with several hundred Jewish people being killed, being literally murdered in the streets. Many others rounded up and arrested. And it really is. Another dog uprising. Wow, apparently the dogs don't like me teaching about the Nazis. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's like, Dan, enough of this. Anyhow, this is kind of like, the Kristallnacht is now historically looked back as kind of, I won't say the first chapter, what comes to be known as the Holocaust, which is, the Nazis' organized attempt to basically kill all the Jews of Europe. But definitely seen as kind of, the opening round of now elevating, that pretty much the way they're going now with Jews is now going to violence. All right. That kind of a thing. All right. Already talked about this. So there it is again. 1936 will also be that year that now that Hitler's been in power for a couple of years, creates that alliance with Mussolini and Italy. Together, they'll be known as the Axis powers. All right. And then he begins his other part. And this actually starts almost as soon as he takes power. And that is his testing of the Treaty of Versailles. Okay. And the main one that Hitler is focused on is the restrictions that the treaty had put on Germany's military. Hitler is determined to rebuild the military. He needs to rebuild the military because he's planning a war already. He's planning a war before he even becomes the leader of Germany. Again, read Mein Kampf. It's right there. You need living space. How are you going to get it? Soviet Union is going to give you that land. You're going to create a war and you're going to conquer them. And other areas that he's planning on taking as well. He needs a military, all right? And so what he starts doing is some of it secretly, some of it not as secretly, but he begins to slowly rebuild the German military. He reestablishes the Air Force. He crashes through the Treaty of Versailles, said that Germany can only have 100,000 soldiers. He smashes through that. And he waits to see what the reaction is going to be. Okay, he even seizes back some of the land that had been taken away from Germany. He marches German soldiers into it, and he's waiting to see what's going to be the reaction. Are the British and the French going to say, "Hey, you're in violation. Stop it, or else"? But instead, really, what he gets in return is silence from them. And again, we can point to the Great Depression. The French and the British are highly distracted by the Great Depression. They're trying to deal with the impacts of the Depression in their own countries. And while they're not completely unaware of what's going on in Germany with Hitler, in a way, it's almost like they are too busy to be bothered by it. It's like, oh my gosh, he's rebuilding the military, but we've got bigger problems here at home right now. It's that kind of thing. Oh my goodness, he grabbed some of that territory that really isn't his. But we still got this unemployment rate we're trying to work on, and so that Great Depression is going to act as a huge distractor. Not to mention the fact that there's going to also be a little bit of a feeling in those leaders in France and Great Britain, almost kind of like a sense of, oh God, no, not again. And almost like a little bit of denial, kind of, that whole idea of, burying your head in the sand. There's a little bit of that comes into play as well, where it's like, we just ended a world war, 15, 16 years ago? And could we really be going in that direction again? Sometimes as humans, denial is how we deal with the issues that we have to focus on. And that gets us into this era of appeasement. When you appease someone, you give in to them. Okay? That's what the term means. When you got a screaming baby and you got to put that little pacifier in their mouth to get them to stop crying, hey, you have appeased that baby, all right? When your friends all want to go out and get, Taco Bell after school, but you really, really, really just wanted a greasy hamburger, you just give, all right, I'll Taco Bell, appease them. It's not worth the argument, that kind of a thing, all right? So let's talk about how it works into here. Big picture, just kind of like what I talked about up there with C, and that is that we are going to see the leaders, mainly of Great Britain and France, okay, because those are the two big countries that probably were in the best position to stop Hitler while it was still early. But part of this is giving in to him because of the distraction and their own problems connected to the Great Depression. And again, some of it, this belief that Hitler would possibly, if they gave him some of what he wanted, that maybe he'd just go away, that it wouldn't turn into a bigger problem. Again, not very realistic thinking, but what are you going to do? All right. So we can talk about appeasement already with his tests and his violations of the Treaty of Versailles. They do nothing to try to push back on it. Okay, they're appeasing him. It's just his military. He wants to have fancy parades and feel all important. He's just probably one of those kind of guys. He won't actually use it. Just don't do anything, right? Things get to a different level in 1938 when Hitler announces what he calls an Anschluss with Austria. In other words, Austria is now going to become part of Germany. He doesn't invade Austria because Austria actually wants to become part of Nazi Germany. Austria by 1938 has a very active Nazi party of their own. And because there is a lot of cultural connection between the two countries, it's kind of like a happy invasion, I guess you could say. But they make this political connection, and in the end, Germany annexes Austria and kind of adds it to the Third Reich. Okay, now according to the Treaty of Versailles, Germany is not supposed to be able to add any new territory, so this is a direct violation. What do England and France do? Nothing. All right, again, appeasement. If we just Then later on that same year, Hitler then demands a portion of the country of Czechoslovakia. Okay, what you're looking here on this map right here is Czechoslovakia, which, as you can see, it backs it right on the other side of the border. Boom, you've got Germany. All right, you got the Deutsch Reich, German Reich, and there is an outer part. What you see here on this map in the green is a part of Czechoslovakia called the Sudetenland. Okay, a lot of the people who lived in the Sudetenland ethnically were German, all right? German traditions, German customs, German language, all that sort of thing. And so Hitler makes this claim that because they are Germanic type people, they should be part of Germany, all right? Those you APWH folks, you're a dentism, all right? Here we go, all right? And he pretty much says, "Hey, Czechoslovakia, give me that land, and if you won't give it to me, I'm going to take it by force." All right, and this does create a crisis, and this finally gets the attention of both the British and the French. They're kind of like, "Oh, wait a minute! Now this guy's all of a sudden talking about using force. He's talking about potentially a war." And so at this point, the British and the French get together with Germany to have a discussion about this. They meet in Munich and they hold a conference to talk Hitler out of this. All right, and try to talk some sense to him. They don't even invite Czechoslovakia to this conference. It's kind of like, hey, we'll get it figured out and we'll let you know how it goes. Right. By the time the conversation is over, the British and French do exactly that. They give the Sudetenland to Hitler. Right? No shot will be fired. They don't even ask Czechoslovakia. What Czechoslovakia is told is, well, we talked to the guy and he's not backing down. So we're going to give him your land. And if you want to fight against him, go ahead. We're not going to help you. You're on your own. Czechoslovakia, they're no position to take on Germany by themselves. And so they have to reluctantly let Hitler take their land. Okay, the Sudetenland becomes part of Germany. And then from there, later on that year, Hitler just takes the rest of Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia, again, knowing that no one's going to help them, don't even fire a shot. And all of Czechoslovakia now is annexed and added to Germany, added to the Third Reich. Okay, it does show the British and French finally that they can't trust Hitler. He basically does a double cross. What Hitler had, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Hitler promised that if he was given the Sudetenland, he would leave the rest of Czechoslovakia alone. There we go. Now that story makes sense. Sorry. Because, now he's gone against his own word. He literally had signed the picture you see over here on the side. This is Neville Chamberlain, who was the Prime Minister of England. He's holding this piece of paper that he comes back from Munich with, and he tells people, "This promises us peace in our time." Herr Hitler said that he will not add any more land. Well, again, months later, he goes against his own word, and now the British and French at least know that you keep appeasing him, but you're not going to get what you want. All right. Very following year, 1939, Hitler makes the next demand. Another part of Poland called Danzig. Many of the people who live there, again, very Germanic. It's kind of like a same repeat of the Sudetenland. Now he's demanding Poland hand this land over to Germany. All right. This time. The British and French are going to take a different position. In the middle of all of this, while Hitler's making these threats and, hold Poland, if you don't give the land to us, we'll take it by force. Out of nowhere, Hitler announces that he and Joseph Stalin, Germany and the Soviet Union, have signed a treaty to promise not to go to war with each other. Right? It's not a treaty where they're making an alliance or anything. It's what we call a non-aggression pact. In other words, we don't get along with each other, but we're going to promise each other not to go to war, all right? Which seems really odd because, hey, you read Mein Kampf, Hitler talked about it right in there. We're going to have to take these guys out. Really what it comes down to is they both have something to gain from this. Hitler, while he's building up his military, it's still not big enough in any position to take on the Soviet Union. So he's trying to buy time, right? Joseph Stalin is trying to do the same thing. He's suspicious of what Hitler's intent is. Did he mean what he said in that book, or is he just bluffing? And he's trying to buy time as well. And so they're kind of doing a weird little political dance here where they're going to pretend that, okay, we won't attack each other. We're going to kind of be friends here, not an alliance by any stretch, but we're not going to be enemies that go to war with each other. It's really, really bizarre because, Hitler's pretty clear about how much he hates communism, and Joseph Stalin's pretty clear about how much he hates fascism. And so, yeah, there you go. Strange little episode, all right? Meanwhile, let's get World War II going, okay? And the way that is going to happen is that Hitler is going to make that demand, okay? That give us Danzig or we're going to take it by force. This time, the British and French say, Germany, if you actually do it, if you send soldiers into Poland, it's going to be war against us as well, all right? Hitler probably just thinks they're bluffing after all the appeasement. And on September 1st, 1939, after Poland does not give up Danzig, he sends his troops into Poland. Poland is going to fight back to defend their country. And so this is going to be the first, this is the beginning of the shooting war. This is the beginning of World War II in Europe. All right, September 1st, 1939. And the following day, when Hitler refuses to pull his troops out of Poland, the British will declare war. And then I think it's the day or so after that, the French will declare war against Germany. And boom, we've got 20 years after the end of World War I, we've got World War II going. Okay, and then where we'll finish this off is going to be over here with letter C, which does follow along with the outline. All right, and this is one thing that a lot of people always lose sight of. We always talk about September 1st, 1939, the beginning of World War II. Well, sort of, okay, because actually for about 2 years already, we can really think about World War II already having been going on, because it is in 1937 that the Japanese launch a major invasion of China. It is their ultimate goal to conquer China for its natural resources and to use that as, basically that's going to be the main supplier to its industry so it can increase the size of its empire in Asia and the Pacific. It is going to be a brutal war. The Chinese are going to be fighting hard against them. Again, this is kind of gets in the middle of all that, that civil war that had been going on in China. This is where Mao and the communists basically call a truce with the KMT, and they fight together against the Japanese. Japan will never fully conquer China. They will take control of large parts of China during the war. Never fully conquer the country, though. But a brutal, brutal war that will go on in China. But we can really consider that in 1937. I mean, definitely World War II in Asia. Some historians will just tell you, really, that's when World War II begins. It just isn't a complete world war. Okay, it's with Hitler's invasion of Poland that is going to make it a full world war. All right, perfect timing. My dinner's ready, and we're done because I think when we jump in, section 7, conducting World War II. Here we'll talk about pretty much we're not going to get into real deep into this battle and that battle, but we are going to talk about some of the basic contours of the fighting of World War II, and so we'll cover some of that business. And will get us one step closer to be finishing with this monstrous unit. Okay, it's one of your longer video notes. Sorry, guys, but a lot to cover. What can I tell you? All right, see you next time.